Hey Chris, how you doing? Everything all right?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to kind of be invited amongst all these great people you're talking to. So, no, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's good. It's good to have you here. And I can't wait to go through Astley's wines. Been a big fan, and it's going to be even more wonderful to learn more about what your family's done and since taking the vineyard on. So I think that's the perfect way to start. Fill us in if you can. Try and sum up what you guys have done at Astley since taking it on, with a little bit of the history as well.
Sure, yeah. So we're lucky that when our family moved here, there's already an established vineyard. We were planted in 1971, which, that makes us this year to 50th anniversary. So 2021 is 50 years of Astley Vineyard. And with that, there's kind of pros and cons to it. We're working with a business that's established, with a reputation and customers and wine and vineyard that were already working. There's a lot of benefits to that, but also trying to break those things apart and trying to build the business that we wanted was also a challenge. So very quickly going through our history, in 1971, it's planted by the Bache family, and it was very hobbyists at this time. They were wine enthusiasts and they drank a lot of wine, and in their retirement, Michael and Betty Bache decided that they wanted to plant a vineyard and have a go themselves. So they drank as much as they made, is the story, and it was very much a party house here. Because in 71, it was reputedly the most northerly vineyard in the world, and there's a lot of people making this claims, and it's very hard to prove. But just thinking about it, 70s English wine barely existed, especially in Worcestershire.
Sure.
So it's a strange place, and they really wanted to kind of double down on that. So there was an outdoor tennis court, and there was an outdoor swimming pool. And, there were wine parties where people just got horrendously drunk. So it's very much party, fun place, but they were investing in the future. And even though they didn't take the business that seriously by what we've heard, they invested in, learning about the grapevines, and they really kind of put their all into the vineyard. So a bit of fun, but taken as seriously as you can do at that point.
Sure.
And then in 1993, a gentleman that you probably knew took over, called Jonty Daniels, and he was trying to professionalize the viticulture. He was he was trained in agronomy from Cambridge, and he was a farm manager from Hertfordshire. So he was really taking the grapes to the next level.
Okay.
And this is when Astley Vineyard's name started to get out there, that we were kind of punching way above our weight, because we are tiny. We're 5 acres here. We make, in a good year like 2018, 10,000 bottles. So that's a drop in the ocean. So the fact that people know our name is testament to our site and what Jonty did with the grapes in particular. So Jonty Daniels, bless his heart, he was very much a farmer, this kind of grumpy farmer stereotype where he didn't have a sales bone in his body. The labels were dated and of their time. The shop was a cupboard under the house. He was a bit of a grumpy sort that didn't really want to sell you wine. What he wanted to do was be in the field with his tractor and grow some grapes. And that's all he wanted to do. And as bad as that is in some ways, investing in the grapes is actually the most important thing, where wine is made from grapes. And so as much as we can criticize them for not doing all these things, we've always grown good grapes here. And that's what we feel very fortunate to have. So he was here for 20 years, and he kind of, we were doing well again for our size. Like Rick Stein had our wine at this point. Our wine had been used at the G8 Summit. We were already served at Sketch, which was a 2 Michelin star restaurant at this point, with no sales pushing. Again, like this all came to us because the grapes were good. So when our family came in 2017, we're from the area. We've been here for the last 25 years. This is where I grew up. And we've all done a career change. Jonty had this kind of agriculture background, but my parents studied history at university and were accountants. I used to work in the music industry, in fact, as a lot of people have in the wine industry, in fact. But there's kind of little bits here and there that make us suited for this. So, even though my parents did different jobs, we've always been keen gardeners, and we had an orchard and we planted all these fruit and veg, and we had a big garden. So my parents aren't afraid of plants, and in fact it's one of their main hobbies. So to them, learning viticulture is specializing, saying take this knowledge and just apply it to 5,000 things of the same type and just have a go, really.
Okay.
And then after, sorry?
I said, okay, so yeah.
Yeah. And then after music, I then actually moved to food and drink. So one of my main hobbies throughout life has been, eating and drinking really well. So I started off just selling brownies and doing simple food jobs after this kind of music career. And then I was very fortunate to move to Harvey Nichols, where I worked in their wine shop for a couple of years. And this is where my life kind of suddenly went on a track, and I went, this is what I'm meant to do. So I got my WSET. I went to Plumpton College, did a winemaking course, and then the vineyard came up for sale, and we went, let's do it. So it's a family business, 4 of us doing this. There's only 4, and it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I was just about to say a lot of work. I didn't realize there's only 4 of you. That's a real commitment, Chris. Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those where online we look a lot bigger than we are, but there are 4 of us. That is it. At harvest, we get volunteers to come help us. We get the odd local kind of enthusiast to come help us do a bit of work in the vineyard, but there are only 4. So when we don't answer emails and stuff, it's because we're doing everything else about the business. And 3 years in, 3.5 years in, there's still a lot happening here. So it's a never-ending project.
Sounds great. Absolutely. I think we should try some wines, Chris. Where would you like to start?
Super. I think a good place is always Seven Vale. So we'll start with our Seven Vale 2019 today, if you don't mind. So the reason we're starting off with this is Seven Vale is very much our house wine. It is very much the wine that we sell a lot of and we show to a lot of people. It is the staple in a lot of people's households. So it's always nice to start here because unlike a lot of the people you've been speaking to, we're not really a sparkling wine producer. We do make one and we're going to try it, but we focus on still wines here. So we're trying probably our best-selling still wine here.
Okay.
And this really epitomizes kind of what I want some wine to be, just really hugely appealing. It's just got a lovely kind of hedgerowy, appley, elderflower aroma, surprising intensity. Sorry?
Oh, yes. No, it's very fragrant. There's a lot there.
I think, for the price point and considering this our staple wine, it's easy to kind of skip over Seven Vale saying, oh, it's just our cheapest wine, but it's often our best value wine. That the whole mentality of Seven Vale is we want it in people's houses. We want the farm shops to have it. It's meant to be the wine that is drunk by the most people. And so when we blend it, it is a bit off dry. There is a bit of sugar in there. So we always intend it to be one of our sweeter wines because that just makes it drinkable. Again, I think the wine industry is very good at kind of making it too academic and making wine for wine people. But we just want a wine that's meant to be drunk for everybody. Yeah. So what we say about Seven Vale is it's the utility wine. It's the desert island wine where you can drink it in no matter the occasion, no matter the dish, and it always tends to work. And that is a huge strength of it. So yeah, it's overlooked wine that we're actually very proud of.
I think, any wine that can be used at any occasion, as you say, or at any time is a good thing. And what struck me immediately was, apart from the aromas, they're very classic English, like cool climate, was actually the mouthfeel and how beautifully it coated the tongue. Really, really, I was actually quite surprised. I didn't expect it to have as much weight and balance, because normally things can get a little off. Go on.
Yeah, well, this is 2019, and actually this is one of the lighter vintages where, vintage variation in the UK is absolutely huge, and we've had 3 very interesting vintages back to back. We've had 18, which was huge yield, huge quality, incredible ripeness. 19 we're drinking now was much smaller quantity and much fresher. The sugars were much lower, the acidities were much higher. So compared to other vintages of Seven Vale, actually, this is quite a light one. This is quite a fresh one compared to other vintages we have. Okay. But you're right, I think it still is quite a full-bodied wine, but in comparison to what we've done before, it is quite different. And then 2020, we've just had minuscule quantity. I mean, this because of the frost, and I guess we'll get onto this as we talk. The frost really damaged vineyards this year, but we have this exceptional quality coming up. So I'm very excited about the 2020. So yeah, everything you say, but also comparatively, it is a much fresher vintage to my palate.
Okay. It's smooth. That's the main thing I picked on. Really lovely and smooth. And I've noticed how I've really picked up, I mean, temperature is very important when serving wines, which we know anyway, but I really noticed in this. So it's very slightly chill, but only a fraction below room temperature. And there's so much there, and I'm actually picking out a lot more because of that. I can really notice how, if it was that bit cooler, I'd miss some of the beautiful texture that's there, because you're getting it. It would almost be too refined, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. You know, people overlook temperature, and you're right. So I start on the over chilled side, so that when it warms up, I can see the full spectrum. And yeah, it just changes as you go along. So I haven't mentioned what goes into here actually, because when we come at blending with Seven Vale, we have the end goal in mind, but we don't particularly mind how we get there. So we always aim for this kind of green fruit, slightly sweeter, very upfront and very fruity. So this vintage is pretty much it's a 2/3 third blend of Bacchus and a bit of Madeleine. Previous vintage had a lot more Sauvignon Blanc in. So again, how we get there, the path changes, but the end goal is often the same.
I like
this is, yeah. Sorry?
No, yeah, sorry. I like that you got the Madeleine Angevine in there, because it's a lovely grape.
Yeah. Yeah, Madeleine's a really interesting one where it's overlooked as a single varietal, and I think that's fair. You know, I think on its own, Madeleine, it's outclassed by Bacchus and other grapes we grow here. But what I've learned in 3 years is that Madeleine is an incredible blending component, and if it doesn't kind of add very overt flavors, to me it acts as the glue. It really kind of binds wines together, and even though you don't really notice like the impact of the aromas, it really holds a wine together. And so a lot of our wines have a bit of Madeleine in, just because we really feel it adds the weight, and it kind of just makes it feel like a complete product. So this one is 40% Madeleine, and actually this tank of Madeleine had a lot of lees aging in it, so just adding a bit of like spicy complexity to it.
Great wine. I was quite surprised actually about how much was going on there. So it's yeah, lovely.
Yeah, I think that's it. You know, because at the moment we sell this for £12 from our shop, and yeah, it is meant to be a wine where value is king. This kind of just upfront, and value is the main, way I describe it. So yeah, I'm glad you like it actually, because I don't think you've tried this wine, or at least recently. So good reaction. Thank you.
No. Well, no, thanks for sending it. No, I hadn't. So which one would you like to do next?
So then we've got a bit of a Kerner marathon ahead of us. So we're going to explore different styles of Kerner. So we'll start with the regular Kerner. We're just going to do our Kerner with our brown label. So we'll move on to this one. As I was talking to you just before we did this tasting, there's actually so many ways you could do this tasting. You said, we normally do sparkling up front, but then that kind of takes away, I think, from Seven Vale, and that deserves a bit in the light. And the way we're doing it now is we're going to see 3 very different styles of Kerner, and yeah, they're all different. So for those that don't know, Kerner is our grape variety. A lot of vineyards are known for a certain thing, and when we came here, when we were doing research, we found out very quickly that Astley Vineyard is Kerner to a lot of people. And Kerner does exist in the UK. It's not exclusive to us, but the thing that makes it special for us is that we shine a light on it. That right now we're trying 3 single varietal Kerner wines, and in fact at some points we've had 5 different Kerner wines. So it does exist, but other vineyards tend to blend it away, let it hide in the background. We've put it right up front to say this is Kerner and this is Kerner as well. Kerner is a blend of Schiava, which is another word for Trollinger, so that's a red grape, and Riesling as well. So it's got this lovely parentage of Riesling, and anyone in the wine industry needs to love Riesling, I think. But Riesling doesn't really grow well in the UK. I know it is grown, and I know some people do succeed with it, but it is very risky. And even Kerner is very risky. It is so late ripening. If Madeleine ripens 2nd week of September, Kerner ripens 3rd, 4th week of October. And given the fact that we're not guaranteed autumns, it is a very risky one. But that means in exceptional years like 2018 and 2020, actually, you get a phenomenal ripeness. And if you get it to reach its potential, it is superb. So this is 2018, and this is showing a style of Kerner. And so it's kind of, I don't know what you think about, how would you describe this, Melanie? Well, I give it away what I think.
No, no, it's fine. There's a lot more depth to this, I've noticed. It's a lot more pronounced on the tongue. There's a beautiful mouthfeel there. It's the texture. It's the main thing I was picking up on, a really lovely mouthfeel. I mean, again, it's you get a lot of the fresh, like crisp apples, lemons as always, but the main thing I keep coming back to and that I'm noticing is just the mouthfeel, how it's coated my tongue in a really almost quite luxurious way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so part of that is the vintage 2018, again, exceptional in so many ways, that the sugars we were getting were just like something we'll never experience. And very luckily, 2018, when we had this glorious vintage, was the year that we finished our winery. So one of the first projects we did was bring the winemaking in-house. And again, it's been a long learning process of kind of just getting used to it. Again, we've all done these different careers, but 2018 was the first vintage we made wine on site. We were very lucky that the grapes we were getting in were just perfect in so many ways. So yeah, so part of the richness is 2018, the vintage. And then also, because the acidity is high, you know, and I've said from the start, I like acidity. I do have like a penchant for acidity. I don't want to be afraid of showing that. You know, because we don't sell any wine to any supermarkets. We're not trying to make middle of the road wines. And if we grow Kerner, which is related to Riesling, and we were once the most northerly vineyard in the world, and we're on sandstone here, acidity comes naturally to us. And so trying to hide it away and kind of defend this high acidity is pointless. So I'm trying to embrace it with this style and say, yes, it's got great acidity and I like it. And so the richness you're talking about comes from actually some of the sugar we add back in. So we can add some RCGM here back in the UK, and it makes it very well balanced. If you've got this very high acidity, it can take quite a bit of sugar and still feel dry, but it has a nice richness to it. So this Kerner and our sparkling really absorbs sweetness very well because the acidity carries it through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. But yeah, the word for this Kerner in particular for me is, I don't think it's aromatic. I think it's very kind of linear and precise. There's a precision to this Kerner, where you talk about citrus, but it's such a well-defined lemon. You know, it is a really ripe lemon. It's very lemon juicy, but very pleasant lemon juice. Yeah, I wouldn't throw a million words at this wine, but I think it is very precise in what it's trying to be.
I completely agree. As you said, a lot of the wines you can pick them apart, and I mean that in a very good way, where you approach it and you can suss out the different citrus and so forth. But again, with what you're saying, I completely agree. I love the fact that it's actually simple on the palate. I don't mean simple in terms of a negative way, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's balanced. There's a few flavors that are very finely balanced again, which all add to the wine, and it's a really, really lovely, smooth white wine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's simple elegance, and because we make quite a big range, you know, we make 10,000 in a good year, and you know, we made a lot less recently. I actually quite like having a large range, and that means that we've got smaller stocks of them, but it allows us to demonstrate what these grapes can do. And Kerner, as we'll find out with later wines, it really ages very well. This kind of connection to Riesling means it really wants to age. It wants to sit there and develop. And so one of the challenges I thought early on was, I want to make something up front. You know, it wants to be old. Well, let's try and make it youthful. And this was my attempt at making a youthful, delicious version of Kerner. And yeah, I'm happy with it, actually. It's aging well. You know, this is currently, 2 years old, and it's fresh as a daisy still. It's just kind of getting a bit more weight. So yeah, it's an interesting development for the vineyard of having this young style of Kerner.
Yeah, as you say, it will be interesting to see how this particular wine ages in the bottle, whether some of the very ripe, fresh citrus elements you got there will probably gently come off their perch, shall we say, and then you'll get a lot more of a smoother, rounder body feel on the tongue. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how this ages. I completely agree.
Yeah, good. And then that's probably a good time to try the other types of Kerner then. So shall we move on to the sparkling Kerner, our vintage sparkling Kerner?
Yes.
Because there's quite a few similarities here that we'll probably spot, because they're very similar base wines. So that tank there, it is about 96% Kerner, that one. Again, there's a bit of Madeleine in there just to kind of round it and kind of tie it all together. But that is, I think it's 3 different tanks in that one, because we're planted in roughly equal proportions, but we split that relatively small amount even into even smaller parcels. And so there's 3 different tanks, 3 different harvest days of Kerner there. We've got a very early one, which is usually in our sparkling. We have a kind of middle of the road one where it's kind of starting to get more sugar but still has acidity, and then we do a much later one which kind of adds the kind of the richer and the riper notes. So that's a blend of 3 tanks here. And then the sparkling has a lot more of the kind of the sparkling base wine, obviously the earliest pick. And so this wine here, unfortunately, isn't for sale at the moment. We've got a real stock issue at the moment. We were briefly talking about how COVID affected us before this chat. And honestly, you know, without making light of a dire situation, our business has done pretty well out of lockdown, because we've got these great, loyal local customers, because we've got this long-term reputation. We've actually sold a hell of a lot of wine in 2020, actually. And so this was one of the wines that suffered. And so we're not currently selling this. But when you asked to chat, I thought, well, I had to show you this because, yeah, it's a nice wine. And this, I love trying this wine, to be honest. Beautiful. So this is 2015. So this is wine we sold for a while and then we kind of held back to try going through the aging process. And yeah, it's delightful because, again, you try a lot of sparklings because you've done, you know, Whiston, you've done Night Timber. This is 100% Kerner. So it is classic methods, you know, traditional methods, English sparkling wine, but it is Kerner. And so, you know, I wonder what you think about the differences are between what you've been trying recently and then this little oddity here.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind, which is a little bit similar with some of the other wines, is the very different mouthfeel, and it's not quite as crisp. It's slightly softer, and I think that's a really, really nice element that this wine is bringing out. It's this lovely balance of, it's almost like you've had like a cooked apple strudel. I mean, I know that it's not to leave people too much away, but it's that softness, that smoothness. There's still a nice bit of bite in there, a little bit of sweetness. But yeah, really, really interesting take on it, because you say it's not the norm, what you've gone down there.
No, it's not. And a very subtle thing which kind of impacts what you're saying is the pressure. This is actually 5 bar. So most champagnes are 6 bar, I believe. And this is 5 bar. So because you've got this very crisp, natural acidity, if you went for higher pressure, those bubbles are really kind of going to burst and be quite aggressive on your tongue. So we go for lower pressure just to kind of balance against this natural acidity we have. So it is often a more light sparkling wine, but I think that works very well with the acidity, that it still feels nice and fresh, but softer in some ways. It's also aging as well. This has about 24 months of lees aging, and then this is about a 3-year-old in the bottle now. So it's had a bit of time, and I'm noticing how it's kind of getting much more kind of rich and round. I much prefer Blonde Noir personally. And it's hard with Riesling because it kind of wants to be a bit more kind of Blanc de Blanc, but trying to find a bit of richness in there. Again, with the sugar, with the dosage for our sparklings tends to be on the upper side of normal because the acidity is on the upper side of normal. If I showed you my pHs compared to other producers, they're eye-watering. And so we really have to find balance and think carefully about the role of sugar. And it's not sugar in a bad way, you know, all of these wine in the cans and these kind of healthy ones where they talk about the calories. You have to think of it more as salt. You know, sugar in wine is salt in food, where it brings out things and it helps finish off a meal. And we're not scared of adding sugar if it helps bring out the wine a bit more.
I think I agree with you. There's a bit of I think confusion for the consumer in terms of sugar-free wines or low sugar, and without actually understanding the purpose of the sugar, and as you say, whether it's natural sugars and how the fermentations occur, etc. So it's a good point you've raised that.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of modern trend towards zero dosage as well, I think that's a very dangerous thing we're playing with, where the ultimate thing is, does it drink well? You know, wine is a drink that's meant to be drunk, and aiming for this low sugar because it's trendy, it's worrying for me that flavor isn't the top priority there. Sure, you can get some lovely zero dosage wines in a ripe year, but you can't make one every year, and it should not be a goal to make one every year. It should be a special, like, this is a hot vintage, I'm going to do zero dosage. So Yeah, it's interesting. This is the whole winemaking process we've learned from scratch. Again, like I was, before this, I was working in a wine shop, and then as a musician. So, this isn't, my dad taught me for generations. We had a consultant, we've got a bit of a wine course, and I've got WSET, but a lot of it is on the job learning. It's kind of stepping back and looking at the picture and thinking, well, that's how they do it, but how should I do it? English wine is a really interesting industry, as I'm sure you're finding out, where you've got these huge producers making with very classic grape varieties, and then you've got people half our size. We're tiny, and there is no one model, there is no one perfect. There's a lot of style, and I think England's got a really interesting future where it works out what it wants to be. And I think what we want to be is a quality small producer. That I think that's kind of what England's missing right now, is that small producers are kind of going down the cheap route because that's a lot easier to do. But we really, if we're going to have a future in England, we really have to keep getting the bar and look at the consistency of night timber and saying, I can't do that, but how can I achieve some of that? So that's what we're trying to do here. I think kind of in a humble way. I want it to sound humble, that we do things very differently and we do not do it perfectly, but we're happy with what we do, and we're trying to just be proud that we've got this kind of direction.
Sure. And I think it's going back to something you mentioned about being a boutique vineyard. Because you're a certain size, doesn't matter a small or large, you have the ability to be flexible, should we say, with your vintages and your wines and your approach, and therefore you're pursuing things in a slightly different way. And I think it's great, if you're happy to go on an explorative path within your wines, and this is what's available now, something else is going to be available next vintage. It adds a bit of excitement and a bit of energy to what you're doing.
Exactly, and I think that's what's kind of carried us through lockdown, is that our range changes a lot, and I think that it's the communication as well. It's not being kind of uppity and kind of sitting on your high horse. It's just saying this is what we're doing, and it's selling out, and it's not pushing sales. It's just informing people that there are 200 bottles, and at this rate, it's gone very soon. So I enjoy, because and honestly as well, it's a lifestyle. We're not going to plant more here. We're not trying to double in size, and you'll never see this in a supermarket. We're trying to focus on quality and other elements of the business. And the experimentation is a lot of what I get joy from. As some people might know, we've made an orange Kerner as well. We're not trying that today because that's pretty funky, but we've done a skin contact Kerner. And it is, if we're going to be here for the next 50 years, what do we want to be doing? And if you can choose your own destiny, what would you do? And so that's what we're trying to do, this kind of fun little bits here. So 3 different Kerners, all very different. Speaking of which, should we move on to the old vine?
Sure.
Finish off the little trio of Kerners. So this is our old vine Kerner. And so this is one of the wines that, when we came in, we rebranded, because again, we've changed all the labels and we've changed some of the names of the wine. Seven Vale has been Seven Vale for 35 years. Old Vine Kerner used to be called Veritas, and Veritas and Old Vine Kerner, for me, they're different brands. If you compare these two wines, where I wanted to separate the branding of them, where this one is a bit more affordable, a simple, elegant style, whilst Old Vine is a bit more kind of, you're into the wine industry here, you're into a bit more of a serious wine. It's a bit more unusual, and so this is meant to be a bit more exciting as a style. And also exciting because this is 2016. This is now a 4-5-year-old wine that is, just singing. And for me, this wine, I love this vintage. I'm particularly happy with this one. Because we moved in 2017, I should say, I had nothing to do with the winemaking, but choosing the release schedule, kind of going into the cellar and seeing what's there and kind of working out their future. This was one where, if you tasted this wine 1 year ago, year and a half ago, it tasted of lemonade. It was absolutely disgusting. I tasted this and thought, this is awful. What am I going to do with it? But this knowledge that Kerner is a bottle aging wine, that you just have to have patience in it, sit back and wait and see. And it's turned into what this wine is now. And it amazes me every time I come back to it, how it's just evolved so much with a bit of bottle aging.
Something that I picked up on, which I wasn't expecting, and reminds me of some other wines, is Yeah, there's this very subtle element of petrol on the nose, you know, very, very subtle, sort of slightly underneath, a bit like Sauvignon Blanc, but there's a lot more depth, which I wasn't expecting at all. I really wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, old vine Kerner with age really starts to show its connection to Riesling, and with time it'll show it. So we were talking about what will the regular Kerner do with bottle age. Hopefully it'll start to show some of these petrol aromas as well. And because we do a lot of vineyard tours here, and I'm saying, oh yes, petrol, you know, you can spot a bit of petrol. In Worcestershire, vineyard tours and wine shops don't really exist, and so they're saying petrol? Like, why would I want my wine to taste of petrol? But you go, trust me, it's a good thing. So I agree with you. It is subtle, and again, bottle variation will show different strengths of it. But yeah, I think that the Riesling connection here is much more evident than other ones. And there's just a richness here. So it is sweeter as well. Again, like the mouthfeel is quite big on this one because this was a riper vintage with a bit more sugar in. But again, the acidity's holding it off. So
I was just about to say, the mouthfeel is actually quite dramatically different when you're doing that. It's definitely got that fullerness to it, or a fuller body.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I was happy to do it at the end, because it does feel like a big chunky wine in comparison to our others that, you know, England with its Madeleine and Bacchus tends to sit on the light side of style, but a bit of bottle aging, a bit of ripeness on Kerner really kind of makes it feel quite full. So this was the, you know, your Christmas wine, your turkey wine. This is the one that stands up to some big foods. Interestingly, with Kerner, Japanese food and Asian food is a huge one. A lot of people talk about sea grape and Pinot Gris being great with Asian food, but because this is a different style with this kind of over-the-top acidity, it's more on the soy side. What we've found is that it pairs incredibly well with sushi dipped in soy sauce and these kind of like black bean style things. So and that's why restaurants and people get excited about this, because it's just a totally different style of wine that I suppose if you had like a lean Chardonnay, you could start to draw comparisons, but it's not quite the same. And we like embracing the weirdness, saying, yeah, it's Kerner. Never had it before. Here's what it's like. So we enjoy the challenge here, and life is challenging. Don't get me wrong. I wish it was easier sometimes, but we can't help it. Like, we enjoy being the black sheep.
Well, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's great you get to have the freedom to experiment and to explore, and these wines are a prime example of that. I'm really impressed with this wine, Chris. I wasn't expecting it to have so much of an impact. It's really interesting how it developed on the tongue, and it did have a very pleasing finish, because sometimes that does die off too quickly. Not with this. It's been a little bit of an eye opener. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if we change the tasting around, the order we did it, it would taste very different. You know, we've just come off the back of the sparkling, where the acidity will kind of make this wine feel richer. If we flipped it around, you'd experience the wines very differently. So that's why I was umming and ahhing so much, because really, I don't think there's a wrong way to do this, but it's how the wines come out. So it's an interesting one, and we've been particularly happy with this vintage from 2016. Luckily, at this point in time, we've still got a few bottles left, so that should carry us through a few more months. God knows what's happening next, though. So yeah, it's an interesting one ahead, where as I emailed you earlier, we're having to stop sales for a bit because our warehouse is very much bare. It is very empty in there. It's worryingly empty, and it's a good sign, because it means we've sold wine, but vineyard needs wine to sell, so we're going to have to get creative in the year ahead, especially with COVID happening. When
do you think you'll be able to, say, get things back up and running, you know, in a more of a fluid manner, should we say, distributing wine, for anyone who wants to know?
I mean, honestly, who knows right now? It's changing on a daily basis. Again, I was talking earlier that my wife's mom, who you might have seen earlier, she visited us over Christmas. She's from Finland. She was meant to be here for a week. It's now week 3, and half an hour before, her flight got cancelled again. And that's really just epitomises what's happening at the moment, where any plans just seem irrelevant like a week or 2 later. I would like to think that we'll be doing socially distant tours in spring, if not summer. I think summer will be getting there. But again, we're not a big location. For us, a tour of 12 people is enough. We used to do 16, but 12 is absolutely fine. We don't get hundreds of people here. We're a small wine shop with 4 of us doing it, so we don't have lofty expectations of bus tours, to be honest. But again, it's making us challenge what we're doing, you know, doing a bit more online things, doing Zoom. I'm looking to do more of that. And yeah, if every year so far has had its challenge, and the one ahead for us is how do we do business with much less wine? And that is a useful thing to learn, actually. So you'll never see us kind of just standing still. There'll always be something weird going on here, but hopefully good weird.
No doubt. I have full faith in you, particularly after trying all the wines and hearing you speak, that there's plenty more to come, no doubt.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but there's a lot happening in England as well, you know, and locally to us, because we're close to the Cotswolds. There's some great wines there. You know, I'm a really big fan of Woodchester. I think Woodchester are doing amazing things there. Their Bacchus is utterly incredible. So there's a lot of really great wine here, and we're trying to be a very friendly and open producer where we don't kind of hide our secrets away. You know, this is a very friendly industry. You know, there are some amazing people in there who are really supportive, and we're just trying to be a part of it. So we sell other people's wines as much as we sell ours, you know, just kind of by suggestion. Because, you know, the success of somebody 50 miles away is a success for us, where it is about raising the bar of English wine as a whole, not just producer by producer. It is about how the industry really develops an identity. And we're trying to really be one of the flagship small producers, because we can't be much more than that, to be honest. You know, we're not going to change the world, but we can at least reassure people that small can be good.
This is a topic that you brought up a few times during the tastings. You say is how people can work together, where you're pursuing your goals as Astley and what you're pushing forward. And it is a lot of about, as an industry, as the English wine industry and Welsh too, is about being more of a collective, I think, and trying to push it as a whole, because the volumes are still fairly low. But then going back to what you were saying, you know, the great thing about being a boutique vineyard like yourselves is you have that freedom. So I think it's a good balancing act that the industry is going to have to go through of how do we all work together whilst retaining the individual identities that clearly you've worked so hard for.
Yeah, and we're watching it very intently, and who knows where it's going to go. And there isn't a right answer and a wrong answer. There is what we end up doing anyway. But I think this kind of engagement in the bigger picture, you know, stepping away, that we make wine, sure we do, but like, what are we trying to achieve, and how can we help not only ourselves but everybody achieve it? So it's interesting, you know. My dad stepped back from this big kind of finance job and with thousands of employees, and now there's 4 of us, and the worry was that he would get bored of it. But really, actually, this is such an interesting job. There's so many challenges that we're thrilled. You know, we love this life, and we're hopefully going to have many more decades ahead of making these weird and wonderful wines.
Well, I think it shows how within the wines and hearing you speak, how enthusiastic you guys all are. So boutique, but full of life, should we say.
Good. I appreciate it. We can't do everything, and enthusiasm is one thing we all have. So yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you for putting aside the time, and pleasure, and what great wines. I mean, we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. No, lovely speaking to you, and I'm sure we'll chat again.
Of course.